Welcome to American Common Sense, a fun look at the state of American politics, inspired by Thomas Paine's Common Sense from 1776, hosted by James Humphreys. Welcome to another episode. It's good to be here today. I want to talk about something that's a little different. It's still in the realm of what we always do, but we're not going to constitution it all, and we're not going to talk heavily about George Washington today. Instead, I want to talk foreign policy just a little bit. The state of American politics when it comes to certain parts of foreign policy. And I want to do this because I want to tell you a story. About 8 days ago, in Lithuania, there was a series of training exercises with NATO that included a number of NATO allies and the United States, of course. A tracked vehicle from the United States went missing. And by the time it was realized it was missing, it was really late. At about 2 a.m, the United States called the Lithuanian dive team and said, "Hey, I need someone from Special Forces to come help us. We've lost a vehicle. We're missing 4 soldiers." Immediately, the Lithuanian Special Forces jumped into action, and they spent several hours searching through a bog filled with mud holes and water and all sorts of challenges. And after hours and hours of diving through mud, which is extremely hard to do over and over again, they found the top of the vehicle about 6.5 feet below the water line of a large mud hole that was about 30 feet wide. They identified it, thankfully, but they couldn't do anything with it. And it took several days. The Polish government sent an engineering team up to help prep the site. Eventually, the U.S. Navy got there with some divers, and working with the Lithuanian Special Forces, they continued to dig through the mud and excavate as much as they could, diving through until they could pull out the vehicle. And when they were able to finally pull the vehicle out, 3 of our 4 missing soldiers were found dead in the vehicle. An Estonian dog team was brought in, working with U.S. forces as well. And after another day and a half or so, they found the 4th soldier a short distance away in the same hole from where the 3 soldiers had been found in the vehicle. Rather than just clean things up and sweep this under the rug and send them home, the Lithuanian government decided to give them the kind of hero's send-off that they require. So this morning, a dear friend of mine sent me a whole bunch of video clips and a bunch of pictures, some of which I'm going to share with you right now, of a memorial service that was held in Villnius. The entire city came to a standstill. Thousands of people lined the streets for the entire parade route and filled the cathedral in Lithuania to provide a memorial service for the 4 fallen American soldiers. While there, Major General Curtis Taylor, who's the commander of U.S. forces in Lithuania, gave a few interviews. An interview that I found most interesting will be linked in the description below for you to follow on YouTube, for those of you who are using that instead of just listening to the podcast. I'm also going to share a short clip right now of what he had to say about his experience with this.
These 3 stories and the experience of the last 8 days remind us how important our allies are, how important alliances are, and how close and permanent our relationship is with the Lithuanian people. Again, I am awestruck by what you have done for our nation. We will never forget it. And thank you that today we are returning all of our soldiers home to their families, and most importantly, that we have made true on our commitment to never leave a fallen comrade. Thank you.
All right, well, I'm glad that you got a chance to see that just like I did, and I'm hoping that you'll really understand why I wanted to show that to you. A lot has been said in the last several weeks by government officials at the highest levels of the United States, talking about the irrelevancy of NATO, the number of countries that aren't paying what their fair share is, the cacophony of people who think that confronting Russia is not a high priority any longer, that Europe needs to take care of itself and they've got to find a way to do this, all sorts of noise. But we forget in all of that noise the importance of what it means to have camaraderie, the bravery, the showmanship, the brotherhood that exists between military individuals, no matter the military they're in, when you're working with allies. I was reminded of that today when I looked through all of these pictures and these video footage of what was happening in Lithuania. The American flags flying everywhere, the Lithuanian flags flying everywhere. This is a very small country of only about 3 million people that borders both Russia and Belarus, that sits just north of what is the Suwalki Gap, which is a 60-mile area that separates Poland and Lithuania from Russia itself. That is one of the greatest choke points or risk points for NATO and its allies. That poor little country, as amazing as they are, would stand no chance whatsoever if the great Russian bear decided to bare its teeth on them again, as it has done in Georgia, as it has done in Azerbaijan, as it has done in Armenia, as it has done in Ukraine twice now in the last 15 years. The fact that anyone in this country, anyone at any level of government, would suggest that the value of the camaraderie and the bravery of the soldiers that risk their lives every day to ensure that Western civilization, that liberal Western values are what is most sought after by freedom-loving people in the world disturbs me beyond belief. The United States has the greatest economy that the world has ever known. It is more than double the size of the largest economy that is next to us, which is China. And we got that way because we spread freedom. We spread Western liberal values, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the right to vote, to choose your government and to have a representative form of government across the globe. More people live under governments that espouse these beliefs, whether they espouse Western culture or not, than have ever lived under free governments in the history of the world. Even countries without Western cultures, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Indonesia, the Philippines, and others, share Western values when it comes to how we govern our populations, ensuring that their people have freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of speech. Our economy is the largest and envy of the world because we made sure that all those markets were open to the US, because we were the beacon on the hill, because we shared those values, we espoused those values, we defended those values globally. We cannot risk turning that tide back for any reason. I believe in an America First agenda the same way that President Trump believes in an America First agenda. I do. But America First became first because we were willing to defend the world, because we were willing to tout Western values throughout the world. And as the brave men and women of the United States who gave their lives in the last several years of wars that we've had, all across the globe to defend those values, to keep those markets open, we cannot, under any circumstances, retreat from that space. In the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan, I want to remind some people about the things that matter. Here's an example that matters. September 11th, 2001, one of the greatest days in infamy in the United States, similar to the beginning of World War II. Obviously, we had September 11th and the towers came down. We had four planes that were a problem in our country. And what did we do with transatlantic flights? We closed all of our airspace. You know who took care of all of that for us? Canada. Canada took the risk without hesitation. Canada had every one of those aircraft stuck in the air land in their airspace at their risk of another potential terrorist issue on their territory to protect the United States because we asked for help. We found the perpetrators. They were huddled in some cave in Afghanistan. The only time NATO's Article 5 was ever invoked was the United States asking for help. And what did we do? We asked for help, and 40 nations across the globe, NATO and non-NATO allies alike, came together and said, we will stand with you. We will go into battle with you, and we will let our men and women take risks and die to protect you, the United States, and your values. In the war in Afghanistan, 32 nations had members of the service that died. Sure, the United States has the lion's share. That's true. It was our war. We started it. We went after those who came after us on September 11th. But nearly 1,200 servicemen and women from other nations, 32 other nations, lost their lives defending our stance on Western values and freedom. In Iraq, in 2003, when we began that war in Iraq, again, nearly 40 nations joined. 24 nations other than the United States lost lives following us into battle. And when we talk about foreign policy, we're going to talk about the failures of foreign policy for just a quick second, and I'll do a whole nother video on this in the beginning. It should be noted a couple of things about all of these situations that matter. The country of Georgia, a non-NATO country that wanted to join NATO, maybe join the European Union, sent troops to both Afghanistan and Iraq. When they were invaded by Russia, the United States slapped a couple of sanctions on them. We abandoned that ally. And now, 2 separate areas of that country are occupied by Russian forces today. Also in the mix, another fun one, the country of Ukraine sent troops to both Afghanistan and Iraq. And in Afghanistan, they had troops die. And when they were invaded in 2014, under the Obama administration, we slapped a few sanctions on a couple of oligarchs. And we abandoned our ally. Again. When the Scarborough Shoal was invaded by China, the Philippines, who had also sent troops to both Afghanistan and Iraq following the United States, we were not there when they were invaded by China on their territory in the South China Sea. No wonder the Philippine government was so angry with us. In the end, we now deal with what's happened in Ukraine, and we'll do a whole video on that later. To question the value of our allies when we have not stood by them over the last couple of decades, when they came to our aid at the drop of a hat, is shameful. I am proud to be an American. I love to see the Stars and Stripes flying. I am grateful to the brave men and women who sacrificed so much of their time from multiple countries to ensure that we honor our word and bring every American home as a result of a tragic accident that happened on a training exercise in Lithuania. I beg all of us to watch and look at the pictures that I've shown you today, to look at the videos that I've linked for you today, and to take a moment and remember that together we have created the largest number of freedom-loving countries the world has ever known. And that as the leader of the free world, the United States cannot, should not, and will not shrink from that responsibility. And anyone who suggests that we should remind them of the bravery of those men and women who've given their lives before we shrink from our responsibilities and put at risk millions of people who enjoy freedom today, whose markets make us the greatest economy in the world, and whose blessings of liberty have been expanded globally because of the example the United States sets. We must continue to set that example, and I pray that each of us will encourage all of our leaders to remember the example we set and to live by that example so that we stop making mistakes and that we honor those the way the Lithuanians have honored us this very day. Thank you, and we will see you in the next one.